So, what if I told you that without a belief in God, you couldn't actually logically tell the difference between a hawk and a handsaw? Sounds pretty crazy, right? Well, that is the radical idea at the very heart of Cornelius Van Til's theory of knowledge, and today, we're going to break it all down.
All right, here's how we're going to tackle this. We're going to follow a six-step path. We'll start with his foundational Christian theory, then move through the massive divide it creates, and go all the way to how it completely redefines the very nature of facts and even logic itself. Let's dive in.
Okay, so, first things first. Everything for Van Til starts with what's called a presupposition. That's just an idea you accept as true before you even start to reason about anything. And for Van Til, the ultimate non-negotiable presupposition is God.
Now, what does that actually mean? Well, Van Til argues that knowledge isn't something we just kind of find floating around out there. He claims that for any fact to be truly knowable, it has to be anchored in God's own perfect knowledge. And for him, this isn't just one option among many. It is the only possible foundation for any knowledge, period.
This whole idea rests on three main pillars. First, you've got an all-knowing God. Second, humanity is created in his image, which means we're capable of receiving that knowledge. And third, the universe itself, every single fact, every single law, is part of that divine plan. So nothing is random. Everything is interpreted by God first.
And this foundation leads to a really stark, really uncompromising conclusion. There is a great divide, a massive split that runs right through all of human thought.
He calls this the antithesis, because the starting points are completely different. The conflict isn't just about religious stuff. No, it's a fundamental disagreement about the nature of everything.
So this leaves you with two totally opposing views. On one side, you have a universe of divine order, where all the facts and laws actually have meaning. And on the other, a universe where everything is just a product of chance. It's all brute, random, and ultimately meaningless. For Van Til, there is absolutely no neutral middle ground here.
Okay, so right about now you're probably thinking, hang on a second. Surely some facts are just facts. For everyone, right? Regardless of their worldview. And this is where the debate gets really interesting and practical.
Exactly. This idea of an absolute divide just seemed to defy common sense for a lot of people. The theologian Abraham Kuyper, for example, he raised a really simple objection.
And the argument is pretty straightforward. Look, anyone can weigh something and get the same answer. It seems like a perfectly neutral activity. But for Van Til, the disagreement was never about the action itself. It was about what makes that action even possible in the first place. And here's the crucial point. Van Til never ever denied that a non-Christian could weigh an apple. His question was different. It was, how can you account for the reliability of weighing, or the stability of the apple, or the laws of physics that make it all work, in a universe that is, by your own starting principle, ultimately just chaotic and random?
So how does Van Til solve this puzzle? How can someone whose worldview should lead to chaos still function in a perfectly orderly world? Well, his answer lies in this really critical distinction he makes, the difference between principle and practice.
Okay, this right here is the absolute key to his whole argument. In principle, he says, a worldview based on pure chance should just lead to chaos. It would make knowledge impossible. But, obviously, that's not what happens in practice. So why not? Van Til's answer is what he calls common grace, this idea that God's power sustains an orderly world for everyone, basically holding them back from the chaotic conclusions of their own worldview.
And he's not just pulling this out of thin air. He's drawing on older Reformed thinkers like John Calvin, who argued that fallen humanity, despite having a fundamentally flawed perspective, can still achieve amazing things in worldly matters, like science and art, even if their ability is more limited when it comes to ultimate spiritual truths.
Now, this same powerful reasoning, this split between what's true in principle and what happens in practice, it doesn't just apply to physical facts. Van Til takes it a massive step further, applying it to logic itself.
And again, you hear that common sense objection pop up. But logic? Seriously, A is A. That's not Christian or non-Christian, it's just logic, right? It's the one tool everyone shares.
So Van Til makes this really subtle but critical distinction. He totally agrees there's only one set of formal rules, like the law of non-contradiction. The difference is the foundation. For the Christian, logic works because it reflects the unchanging, rational character of God. But if your foundation is just pure chance, then logic itself has nothing to stand on. Why couldn't A become not A tomorrow if absolutely everything is random at its core?
And all of this brings us to Van Til's final and easily his most provocative conclusion about the very nature of reality itself.
And you can imagine, people heard this and just couldn't believe it. Critics, like the philosopher Jesse de Boer, found it to be an extreme and, as another called it, a suffocating idea. I mean, the claim that you need to presuppose God just to tell two different objects apart, it just sounded absurd.
But for Van Til, the logic was just inescapable. If the universe isn't ordered by a divine plan that gives everything its unique nature, then the only alternative is ultimate chaos. In a world of pure chance, a hawk and a handsaw are just random collections of atoms. They have no stable identity, no real discernible character.
So here's the crucial takeaway. On his view, non-Christians can be brilliant scientists and amazing thinkers only because they are operating in an orderly, predictable universe that their own worldview can't actually account for. In a way, they are borrowing the stability of the Christian worldview just to make any sense of the world at all.
So at the end of the day, whether you agree with him or not, Van Til leaves us with this really provocative challenge. Is the order we see in the world just a self-evident fact? Or are we all, in some way, borrowing from a foundation that maybe we haven't fully acknowledged? What is your knowledge really resting on?